It's Lloyd, and I'm here with JC. We're going to be talking about Islam and looking at the pre-Islamic history of the particular, well, of Arabia, of East Africa, the area closest to the Islamic lands, as well as Yemen. And we want to find out what pagan influences were there, what pre-Islamic pagan influences were there on Islam. And so far, I think we have found plenty. So yeah, see Andrew, thanks very much. So yeah, encouraging people to like this. So yeah, we're on part 7, and yeah, I think there is a lot that hasn't been examined. These things are in the hadiths, it's in the Sirah, it's in various other historical records to do with Islam, but they're unexplained. And I think we can start to see that Muhammad was picking and choosing from anything and everything. So yeah, welcome MA552. JC, welcome back to another episode. And anything you want to share about this before we dive into the slides?
Well, I'd say it's been quite encouraging to see that Ahmed Al Jalad had these videos recently in the last 1 month, saying some things that you are actually covering here, of course in a different manner, but him finding inscriptions that before they were never really deciphered, and now he has deciphered, and we start seeing these names of pagan gods that make it into the traditions, make it into the Quran, and so on. So it's exciting to see how data is starting to point us in the right direction, and it looks like we were directionally correct to begin with. So that's very good.
Yeah, finally, I think the evidence is mounting. Archaeology is catching up. So that's going to give Muslims something to think about. And I think it's really putting them on the back foot. So let's dive into where we were when we finished last time. So what I've done is I've given the article, this one, about Mondays in Islam, right? The gates of paradise are flung open on Monday. Muhammad's born on a Monday, becomes a prophet on a Monday. He puts the cornerstone into the Kaaba or whatever on a Monday. So there's a whole bunch of things, right? Monday is given incredible importance. And of course, so much happens as they describe. Monday's the day he was born. Monday's the day revelation was sent down to him, right? And so Monday. The black stone was placed in the Kaaba on a Monday. The Miraj, when he went to paradise to visit Allah, that was on a Monday. Monday is the most important day for Muslims. Monday is an incredibly important day for Muhammad. And here's the 11 virtues of Mondays that Muslims need to know. And then, of course, we find out that the Lord of Monday in Islam is the vice demon of hell. So that's Moon Day. And this is, of course, is Al-Abyad, the Lord of Monday, and the moon, which is interesting since we've been talking about monotheism and the moon religion influence on Islam. And Mura al-Abyad, the Jinn king of Monday and the king of the moon. The white one, the father of light. Sounds a little bit like Satan in the Bible, like Lucifer. Al-Abyad, Abd al-Nur, or Mara, the white king, Malik al-Abyad, is Lord of Monday and the moon, Qamar. It is reported from Atta that Ibn Abbas said, a devil called Al-Abyad came to the Prophet in the form of Jibreel, or maybe this demon was Jibreel, and cast these words, the satanic verses, upon Muhammad, and the Prophet recited them. So maybe this demon made Muhammad recite more than just the satanic verses. Maybe he made him recite the entire Quran. I just find the fascination with Monday, the importance of Monday, and the fact that the Lord of Monday has such an impactful role in Muhammad. I think that's more than a little bit suspicious. And he's said to be closest to Satan in his court. Any thoughts on this particular revelation?
Yeah, this whole thing with Monday is really interesting. I think what it tells me is that it was important for the people who were making up these stories. Say, for example, that there is groups in Christianity who have a lot of traditions about Wednesdays, for instance. Well, we would be able to just track it back to the original monks who wrote those things, and things got out of line, and we would say, okay, so these things came from this region for that reason. It has nothing to do with the religion. In Islam, it looks like you are looking at this and someone wrote these things which they became part of the tradition, but they were not there because of the origins of Islam, but rather because of the culture. So this is probably pointing in the direction of who the real creators of Islam were.
Yeah, certainly leads one to questions, especially when this is the particular demon, the Lord of Monday, the King of Monday, and the King of the Moon, right? Really odd. And then also, if you're interested in summoning the Lord of Monday, Al-Abyad, well, Muslims are happy to provide you with an invocation. You want to conjure him to serve you, then this apparently is what you say, right? Now, apparently, this is transliteration or this is just nonsense, a nonsense invocation that you use, who knows? But let's see, fast 40 days for the Sheikh of Allah, abstaining from all meat products. After the obligatory prayer, recite the conjuration 100 times, and then recite Surah Al-Jinn 3 times. And the incense, right? Or Muqlil, Azruk, and Oud. On the last day, you recite the conjuration with incense until he comes with his army, and the King Abyad will assist all your needs after making an agreement with you. So if you want, you actually have a conjuration where you can summon him to do whatever you need him to do. This sounds a little bit like people who make pacts with the devil, but I'm not sure why Muslims are recommending that people say the prayer and then ask for this guy to visit. Just really strange. Any comment, any thoughts on this? Anything you see here? That I just find it very strange that Muslims will talk about this.
Okay, yes, that's very strange. I've never actually heard that in Islam they had these conjuring spells to actually summon demon kings to come to your aid. It's very suspicious, yes.
Yeah, a little bit on. Hey, Janice. Janice, missed you yesterday when I was doing the final episode of the Fabians, and these people are, as you know, genocidal freaks, but they're the ones that run the UK, and it might be worth a watch. And I think it's pretty disturbing just how much they've infiltrated the UK government, and the kind of people at the bottom of this. It's something that's worth learning and discussing with others. All right, let's look at Al-Makkah, and let's have a look at the Encyclopedia of Spirits. So Al-Makkah is the Lord of the horned goats, the Lord of the ibexes. Notice the horns here, right? Notice the horns and then notice the horns, right? You'll notice that these people have horns. And he's known as Il-Mukka, Il-Muk, Ilunku, also known as Allah, also known as Shin, and other names. Origin is Sabaean, Yemeni, and he appears to have been the preeminent deity of the South Arabian kingdom of Sabah, now modern Yemen. He was venerated in what is now Eritrea, so he's also from Northeast Africa. The Sabaeans called themselves Al-Makkah's children. Very interesting. So, Sabaean inscriptions invoking him date from the 7th century BC. The great temple in Marib, Yemen, sometimes called the 8th one of the world, seems to have been dedicated to him. He seems to have dominion over the rain. He controls storms, rain, and flood. Now, I should note that there are many channels there are many people that want to debunk Christianity, and they try to compare Yahweh to the thunder god, to the rain god, right, the god of the weather. And notice here you've got Al-Makkah, who is Allah, who has this particular Islamic symbol as his symbol, who also happens to be the thunder god. I think maybe people got their signals a little bit crossed, and they need to have a closer look at Islam. He's the guardian of irrigation, which is crucial to a desert nation, and his planet is the moon. His sacred animal is the bull, the goat, and the ibex. Very interesting. The little ibex horns here, which is the same horns on Alexander the Great. His emblem is represented by a geometric image of a circle rising above a crescent. That should be familiar to anyone who's seen the Islamic crescent and star. This is usually interpreted as a sun over the crescent moon, but it could also be a full moon within cattle horns, similar to crowns of Hathor and Isis. Anything before I move on?
No, I'm good.
The sun descends over the horns of Satan in the Hadith. Okay. Hello, Bug Katie, Freddie. Hello there. Let's see who else. Freddie, thanks for the birthday wishes. Happy birthday to you too. Hello, Harry from Boskoop in the Netherlands. Okay, and it says here, this is in Sunnah.com. This is Sahih Bukhari, military expeditions led by the Prophet, right? Is al-Maghazi and the delegation of Banu Hanifa. We used to worship stones. It says here, we used to worship stones, and when we found a better stone than the first one, we would throw the first one and take the latter. Very interesting that Muslims used to worship stones, and when they found a bigger stone, they would, throw away the old one and take the new one. Because so far, no ancient Arabian religious texts have been recovered, little is known of the development of ancient Arabian religions. It's very odd that of this religion, no texts have been recovered. Where did they all go? That's very weird. But it seems that Arabia succeeded in withstanding changes more stubbornly than other parts of the ancient world with similar beliefs, which is not surprising in view of its isolation. After the fall of the Babylonian Empire, and increasingly after the Hellenistic period, the solar theology began to replace the lunar religion in many countries where it had formerly reigned. But the South Arabian moon god remained supreme, and the sun goddess and their son, the star god, ranked always below him. The best known and most widespread symbol of this religion of sky gods was the ancient Babylonian symbol of the sun disk in the crescent of the moon. So here you've got crescent and star, crescent and moon, crescent and sun, So the moon crescent and star, or moon crescent and sun. Tiny sun, big moon. So maybe the star. In other words, a combination of the sky of the day and the sky of the night, the entire circle of heaven. That would be an astrological religion, as Herodotus calls it when speaking of the religion of the Persians. That's the Zoroastrians, another Zoroastrian link. In some cases, the symbol is actually a complete circle with the swelling of the crescent added to its lower part. And you can see here it is again. That's basically the Islamic symbol, the primitive version of the Islamic symbol. And it's derived from Zoroastrianism as well as these ancient pagan religions. Any thoughts?
Yeah. So these are the sort of things that I mentioned I always took for granted until you actually started to talk about these things, when now I'm thinking like, hang on a minute, there is more. So if we forget absolutely everything that we know about Islam, about the traditions, what we've been told, all that we would need to do is see, hey, these Arabian guys, they used to worship stones, and we look now and Islam is still worshiping a stone. That's parallel. There is continuity there. And with the symbols, exactly the same. Like they use the symbols. Hey, they were actually being used there. And I think it was in the previous slide that you showed that there was this massive temple right there in Yemen to this Al-Makka god using this symbol. So it would have been a lot of history in there, and it actually makes it into Islam. Once things are presented like this, it not only it makes sense, is the continuity is there. It must be this.
Yeah, there's certainly something. So now let's have a look at the Kaaba, right? Pagan pillars, crescent, moon. So let's look at the Kaaba. Remember, we just learned about the symbolism of this ancient religion was often the entire circle of the sun, and the moon was added to the bottom of it to thicken it, right? Or you just had, but remember, you had the father moon, the mother sun, and the children, the stars, right? So let's have a look inside the Kaaba. Let's start with here. You've got three pillars, just like you've got three pillars here, and you've got the bull's horns here. You've got three pillars, the bull's horns, right? Now, here you've got the Kaaba, which is black like night. And in some descriptions, this is meant to be like the stars in the sky, like the Milky Way, right? That covers the sky, right? The black sky. But notice you've got the crescent of the moon, and you've got the lights that are the stars. So you've got the moon, the stars, and pretty soon you might start to see the sun, but you can see people arranged in a circle around it, right, like radiance. So you've already got this kind of symbolism here. You've got the crescent. Why is there a crescent moon running, along with these lamps that symbolize the stars, right? Here you've got an interior view, and there's water, right? And notice as they go around, what you've got is this is apparently symbolic of Allah's hand in the center of the earth, because Mecca is now apparently in the center of the earth, and it's analogous to the center of the sky. And as the stars go around, the people go around, and so there's apparently an astronomical overlap here, right? And apparently you've got this little circular disc around here. You've got the sun, and you've got the moon crescent, and you've got the stars. So yeah, just a really interesting set of ideas that they've got present here. And yeah, anything, JC, you might want to add?
No, it looks quite visual and clear. I had never actually thought about the symbolism of these things, but yeah, now that you are pointing it out, it certainly doesn't come from the Christian faith.
Yeah, the stars are the children, right? So the stars go around the center, just like the stars go around the center. So really interesting. Yeah, I'm going to skip that. Okay, so now the Muslims have to say a prayer when circumambulating the Kaaba. Now notice this little spout here. You'll see this little thing here. This black thing here is actually a spout. It's a rain spout, right? You'll see it again here. It's a little rain spout right there, right? So when you go around the Kaaba, Muslims have to say this prayer. Even with the rain spout, called the spout of mercy, okay, the Mizab al-Rahmah at the top of the Kaaba, one says, Allah, shade me in your shade on a day when there is no shade but yours. Give me drink from the cup of your Prophet Muhammad. Give me drink from the cup of your Prophet. Interesting. And he took the cup and he gave them, and he told them, drink, for this is my, oh my gosh. Yeah. And Allah bless him and give him peace, a wholesome drink, after which I will never thirst. Are you getting New Testament vibes here?
Come on, this is just copy paste.
So Mulhid is telling us that Andrew Martin cannot read, write, or speak Arabic. Yeah, we have the audacity to discuss Islam without speaking Arabic. But Mulhid, you see, Muslims talk about Christianity without knowing Koine Greek or ancient Hebrew. So yeah, just fair is fair, right? So anyway, so after which I will never thirst. Now, I don't know about Muhammad giving people a cup to drink from which they will never thirst, but I'm sure if we look in the Gospels, we're going to find references to Jesus speaking of cups, drinking, and that he is maybe the fountain and from which people will never thirst again. So yeah, this is plagiarized straight out of Islam. Islam is plagiarizing straight out of the Gospels there. Oh, wow. Art Butler, thank you very much. Says, please carry on, Mr. Lloyd. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. So, okay. So we have, obviously, look, if you check the description box, you're going to find my Google archive, right? You'll learn more. Now, let's have a quick look at the life of Muhammad the Prophet from Sayyid, spelled three different ways, but Sayyid means that you are a descendant from the lineage, the family of the Prophet. So you are apparently born in the line of the Prophet as a descendant. So Sayyid, Akhtar Rizvi. And Abdullah, yep, he was copying from the Bible, all the good bits. Yep. Abdullah ibn Masud says, entering the Masjidul Haram, the Prophet started breaking and demolishing the idols. There were 360 idols in the walls and on the roof of the Kaaba with lead or tin. And any idol near which the Prophet went and towards which he pointed his cane, he said, Klatu, Niktu, Barata. And when he said the words, right has come and falsehood has vanished, verily, falsehood is designed to vanish or destined to vanish, which is Quran 1781. So Muhammad would then quote Quran 1781, and the idol would fall headlong on the ground with no one touching it. So I guess Voldemort would wave his magic wand, and this is how they cleaned the 360 idols out of the Kaaba. Did you know that, JC?
I have no idea. I had assumed that they just actually took them out on a cart, went to the next city, and then sold them for a profit. But this is very curious. Every story like this, where Muhammad has any sort of superpowers, they are late. They are very, very, very late. So it doesn't surprise me when they go through the Quran and they try to find any verses that they can then try to reinterpret to give him miracles. So certainly it wasn't a very early belief, but it is there nonetheless.
Yeah, but there you go. So apparently, Muhammad used magic. Muhammad was a magic wielder. He would use his magic wand, his magic staff. He was a bit like, I don't know. I'd hate to see him sort of as Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings, but yeah, definitely more like Voldemort. Yeah, Momo the magician. So yeah, apparently Momo was a magician. I didn't write this. Now, this is another miracle of Momo from the Sirah. He pointed his cane, said a few words, and the idols in the Kaaba would fall over without anyone touching them. So he's a little bit, that's a bit like Harry Potter, and I think just as fictional. So the Kaaba. Now, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but the Kaaba predates Islam, and it is claimed to have been first built by Abraham and his son Ishmael, although some Muslims will claim it was built by Adam. Adam was apparently 30 plus meters tall. He was 90 feet tall at least. And so why a 30-meter tall human would want to build a building that's not taller than 12 meters? I have no idea. It's like Zoolander and his school for ants, right? So apparently built by Abraham and his son Ismail, or in other stories, it's kind of rebuilt or repaired or recovered. But of course, when Hagar gets to Mecca, which is the oldest city in the world, there was nothing. It's always existed. It's always been there. It's the oldest temple on earth. But when she got there was nothing. She was running between Safa and Marwa, looking for water, looking for something, but there was no Zamzam, there was nothing. There was no Kaaba, but Abraham built it, but apparently Adam built it. So, but there are no archaeological findings to support the argument. The pre-Islamic Kaaba was rebuilt several times by the tribes ruling Mecca, who used it to house sacred objects, including the black stone. During the life of the Prophet Mohammed, the Qurayshi rebuilt the Kaaba with alternating courses of wood and stone. But that's how the Ethiopians used to build churches. The inner space was divided into two rooms, one of which housed the black stone, and the interior walls were decorated with paintings of Abraham, Mary, Jesus, angels, prophets, and trees. And the exterior cloth was covered with the Habrat cloth from Yemen. Very interesting that the Kaaba was covered with the cloth from Yemen. Welcome, Thunderous. How are you doing?
Hey, Thunderous.
Okay, while you get your audio issues sorted out, Thunderous, yeah. Okay, so the Kaaba, right? The Abbasid caliphs contributed to the design of the Kaaba. They went and covered it with the kiswa, a black cloth bought from Tanis in Egypt. Every year they replaced the kiswa cloth with a new one. Right, there are 8 curtains, a pair on each side of the cube, embroidered with gold calligraphy expressing the Shahada. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the Prophet of Allah. Right? So, let me see. Following the Mamluk rule of the Hijaz, which lasted from 1269 to the 1500s, Mecca was under the control of the Ottoman sultans. Sultan Suleiman renovated the roof of the Kaaba, ordered the wooden ceiling painted with golden calligraphy and floral patterns. Damaged in a flood in 1611, it was rebuilt by Sultan Murad IV. The new foundation was laid according to supposedly Abraham's plan. Where the plan can be found, no one knows. The upper structure was built with large granite blocks on a 25-centimeter high marble base. The columns were built to support the roof on the inside. They were covered with golden decorations. Silver and gold lamps suspended from the ceiling. And the silver door from Suleiman I was placed off-center on the northeast wall. The Kaaba was covered with 2 kiswas, a red cloth covered with a black one, replaced annually. So you've also got the Hatim, that's that semicircular, that crescent-shaped wall, and supposedly Ismail and his mother are buried between that thing and the wall of the Kaaba. So apparently their bodies are right there. So the black stone is embedded in one corner, and yeah, so that's supposedly the Kaaba. So notice that Muslims will give you diagrams like this. They celebrate when the moon is directly above the Kaaba, you see. So why would they want to make pictures like this where they want to associate the moon? I've never seen a picture of any Christians talking about a church and going crazy with the moon above the church and drawing lines and saying, hey, look, the moon is right above us and we're the same, whatever. And then this, of course, all of the amazing things they did in the Kaaba, you can see, guys, this is the greatest Islamic temple on earth. It is just fantastic. It is amazing. And I know you guys look at this and go, I've never seen a church this nice. These gray, ugly cinder blocks go back thousands of years. This is the world's oldest temple. This is incredible. We need to say the Shahada right now. Don't you think so, JC?
Yeah, I'm seriously considering it. I hope that we will have Robert Kerr coming on the show and actually speaking about the Kaaba. Odon said that Robert Kerr has done a lot of work on the history. So the things that you have shown before, I think probably he would be talking about that. But in short, that even the Kaaba has actually changed a lot. And what we see now, and every Muslim thinks that is what there was there during the time of Muhammad, that's actually not the case. And I think what you have just read, it actually confirms that during that time, the 17th century or thereabouts, the Caliph actually said, here you go. This is actually the new plans, but they are actually the old plans, which I have just come up with. And then the Kaaba changed, but Muslims are not told this. So very interesting stuff.
You can see where there used to be a door right here. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see there used to be a door right there. So guys, this is how Muhammad built the oldest temple in the world. And okay, so maybe there were earthquakes, maybe there were fires, maybe there were floods, maybe it was destroyed by invading armies, but they rebuilt it to be the most amazing, most fantastic looking temple ever. You know, now honestly, I have seen paid toilets in cities, places which sometimes were pretty amazing, but this just doesn't, this doesn't come across as very impressive. Now, of course, if you want to lick the Kaaba, you feel free. There's plenty of videos online with men abusing women, with men getting a little frisky, and these but this definitely doesn't look like they're worshiping a stone at all. Right, JC?
Yeah, I think if you Google the what is the meaning of the word pagan, and then you go to images, I think you're gonna see this. I don't think it can get any more pagan than this.
Yeah, that's literally licking. Yeah. Thunderous, are you with us? Is your audio working? You know, we don't hear you, Thunderous. Are you there? Let me send him a text.
I think he's blessing us just with in spirit.
Okay, well, let's see what happens. So yeah, amazing stuff, the Kaaba. K.C. Creswell, citing E. Littman's opinion, identified the etymology of the name Bakum with Habakkuk in Amharic form. And they both took the view that Bakum was probably Ethiopian. Okay. There's also an Ethiopian tradition that an architect from Ethiopia went to assist in rebuilding the Kaaba. Al-Azraqi records the following. So very interesting. Bakum. Thunderous, you with us?
Can you hear me now, lads?
It's coming through very badly, distorted audio.
Okay, let me try again, sorry.
So let's continue. So Bakum al-Rumi said to the Quraysh, do you want the roof of the Kaaba pitched or flat? Rather build the house of our Lord flat. He apparently Al-Azraqi's grandfather, so they built it flat and they put in it 6 columns in 2 rows. 6 columns. Now you might remember in the beginning, all of these Yemeni temples that I showed had multiple columns. And sometimes they had 6 columns because they worshipped these gods as columns. So the Kaaba apparently used to have 6 columns. Let me go to the beginning. I'm here on page 161. Let me go right back to the beginning. I want to show you the example that I had before of the columns. It's going to be here. Let me just show you this. Notice this one has 8 columns, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 columns. See that? So they would have multiple columns. And apparently the Kaaba used to have not just 3, but 6 columns, like this Yemeni pagan temple to Al-Makkah. Any thoughts on that, JC?
So there were inside the Kaaba 6 different columns, and now they have replaced that with just the 3.
Yeah, they removed it to 3 columns. Very fascinating.
Okay.
So let me go back, and hopefully Thunderous gets himself sorted out quickly. So they put in 6 columns in 2 rows. So there were 6 columns, right? It's interesting that they've taken away 3 of the columns. And in fact, that the Kaaba has changed so significantly because according to Islamic sources that we covered early in the series, the Kaaba had pictures of Jesus and pictures of Mary, which is really interesting. There were paintings and drawings all over it, and now they're missing, which means these people venerated Jesus, not pictures of Muhammad, pictures of Jesus and his mother. So one has to wonder, what kind of religion was this back then, right?
Also, the cloth around the Kaaba, it used to have many colors according to the traditions. I don't remember if it was the Abbasids that made it all black, but it used to be a bit more, friendly to different groups.
Yeah. So so the short version, they made lots of changes to it. They made multiple changes. They added this, added that, did this, did this. So they changed it around constantly. They didn't just preserve what was there. They made significant additions. It looks nothing like it used to look. When you look at descriptions from the 16th century or the 15th century from travelers who'd seen it, the Kaaba looks nothing like what ancient travelers described the Kaaba looking at, right? It says here, and they put on its columns pictures of the prophets, pictures of trees, pictures of angels, and there was a picture of the prophet Ibrahim Khalil al-Rahman with divining arrows. A prophet with divining arrows, that's a pagan practice. That was the practice in Muhammad's day when he was a child before Islam. They used to use divining arrows, and a picture of Isa bin Maryam and his mother, i.e. Jesus and Mary. Very interesting that they used to have these inside. So you've got a temple that had divining arrows with this prophet, Ibrahim Khalil al-Rahman, who's heard of him, and pictures of Jesus and Mary. Thunderous.
Okay, can you hear me now, guys?
Yeah, a little bit of background noise, but yeah, I can hear you.
Excellent.
Yeah, any thoughts so far, what you've heard?
Well, I did have some points earlier on, but obviously nobody can hear me now. The thoughts have evaporated from my mind, so I'm going to have to play a little bit of catch-up, guys. Sorry, everybody, for the inconvenience.
Okay, so fine, I'll just continue, and we can just... So an inscription of one of the 6 pillars mentions Al-Makkah of Baran. Interesting. A 5th century bronze Prague fragment from the Baran temple shows 2 ibexes. Let me just go back. You might remember that I mentioned, you see the little bull here? Could also be an ibex. Here's the ibex, Al-Makkah, who is also Allah, who is the moon god, who's the Yemeni moon god. This guy has the same horns, right? So now, 6 pillars, don't forget 6 pillars. Let's go back, and we find here we have 6 pillars. A 5th century bronze Prague fragment from the Baran temple shows 2 ibexes, an Assyrian-styled tree of life between 2 winged bulls and 6 warriors, each carrying bows and a trophy, the severed hand of the defeated enemy. That sounds like a religion of peace right there. The ibexes and bulls are the moon god symbols, and the warriors with severed hands show that Al-Makkah was a war and moon god. The 7 hands remains one of the punishments set forth in the Quran, and the Quran also says to cut off fingertips and heads. Fascinating stuff. Now they're talking about 6 monolithic pillars on the temple to Al-Makkah, and the Kaaba used to have 6 pillars as well.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, when we had Kalam speaking about his research, I think he mentioned that there was an account of one of the pillars of one of, I think it was the temple in Sana or nearby, so perhaps this one was actually used for the Kaaba in Mecca, like it was moved from A to B. I can't remember the source, but for anyone who is interested, they can actually watch that. So that there was a source where one of the pillars in the Kaaba was originally from Yemen.
Yep, so I'm just trying to find a reference to divination arrows, but when Muhammad was a baby, his grandfather took him into the Kaaba, and there was some sort of divination that happened using arrows. And I'm just trying to see if I can find a reference to divination, but it's in reference to Muhammad being a baby.
Wasn't there also a story of Muhammad having his heart cut open as well, and some impurity taken out? I don't know if that was associated with the Kaaba as well.
No, that's when Muhammad was like 4 or 5 years old. He was tending sheep. Muhammad was a shepherd. He was a young boy as a shepherd, and as he was tending the flocks by day, 2 angels came down and they cut him open, and they removed a dark speck from his heart, which was the drop of evil that was inside him. And then they washed him with ice water, and they sewed him up, and they removed all evil from him.
But wouldn't that have taken place at the Kaaba, considering that would be the most holy place on earth, and Muhammad is supposed to be the most holiest of all prophets, and the Kaaba is in line with the celestial Kaaba in heaven? If some impurity or some kind of service was going to take place, surely logic would dictate, given that all the facts of cleansing that would have taken place in Jerusalem at the Jerusalem temple, why on earth would Muhammad be tended to in the field? This would logically take place, if the narrative was true, taking place.
No, but he was tending to sheep. I know of a guy in the Gospels who was tending to his flocks, who was the sheep, the shepherd to the sheep, and he was here for the lost sheep. I don't know if you know any guy like that in the Gospels.
I don't know. You're on about the guy that was born of a virgin, that Muhammad even agreed born of a virgin.
Yeah, there's a guy like that. There's a guy born of a Virgin Mary or something like that, and Son of God. He tended the sheep. Yeah, something. So I think the Quran is trying to give us at least the Seerah is trying to give us a story here. For instance, here we go. Abdul Muttalib denied this, but was willing to submit the matter to the sacred Lot. He said he would make 2 arrows for the Kaaba, 2 for them, 2 for himself. And he made 2 yellow arrows for the Kaaba, 2 black ones for himself, 2 white ones for the Quraysh. They were given to the priest in charge of the divinatory arrows that were then thrown beside Hubal. Hubal was the image in the middle of the Kaaba, the greatest of their images. So you see, arise Hubal, make your religion victorious. So you can see the parallels here to Islam, and this is Muhammad's grandfather. And yeah, this is the Kaaba, and they were doing divinatory. So yeah, I think we can see the parallel here. This is no different to what they were doing to Al-Makkah. This is exactly the same thing. This was a temple to Al-Makkah. The historian Azraqi said that the angels circumambulated in heaven around a celestial Kaaba, and that the Kaaba on earth was similar to the one in heaven. Tabari related that Muhammad connected the worship of Allah and the movement of the stars. So I'm going to go back a little bit. We're just going to go back a moment. Muhammad connected, this was the Kaaba on earth, which was connected to the Kaaba in the sky, and the movement of the stars around the Kaaba. So yeah, hopefully you can figure out that maybe Muslims are trying to tell us something here. Any thoughts on this, guys?
But the first thing that comes to my mind in all of this is Graham Hancock's research in megalithic structures found in various locations around the world, from Africa to South America to China. Megalithic structures that are associated, that's construction is associated with some kind of star alignment or stellar performance of movement of celestial objects in the sky. It just seems interesting that if Mecca is supposed to be the holiest place on earth as far as Islam is concerned, it's quite an entry-level shack in comparison to fantastic megalithic structures that are of greater proportion and construction and magnificence in comparison to the Kaaba.
Right. So notice they speak of the 5 stars, the visible planets, rise and run like sun and moon and race them together. The stars are suspended from heaven as lamps are from mosques. So you see, there's this whole symbolism in Islam that hasn't gone away. They might re-explain it, but it's all derived from astrological symbolism. Interesting, these statues of Mary and Jesus remain in the Kaaba from the time of Muhammad until the Kaaba was destroyed by fire in 683 AD. Peters quotes from Al-Azraqi. Ibn Rabah said that he saw in the house a decorated statue of Mary, with a decorated Jesus sitting on her lap, and the house contained 6 pillars. So yeah, you've got this mixture of moon religion and worship of Jesus somehow. So you've got some kind of syncretic thing going on here. And the representation of Jesus was on the pillar next to the door. And this was destroyed by fire.
It's interesting that you're talking about synchronicity, because Jesus sitting in the lap of Mary, it kind of reminds me when Muhammad was sitting in the lap of Khadijah the night that he got the revelations, the first night he got the revelations. Do you think there's some kind of similarity there, or is that just a coincidence?
I think, you know, there's going to be some kind of narrative synchronicity, certainly. But I mean, you're going to have this kind of thing. I mean, you're going to have this kind of imagery, the very Catholic imagery, and then you're going to have baby Jesus. You're going to have this kind of thing. So I suspect there was some kind of syncretic religion, like the Jerusalem thesis posits this, that there was some kind of Judeo-Nazarene thing going on. So I think we're dealing with something similar to that. So these are pagans that were trying to absorb ideas from other religions. They were moving towards monotheism. They were absorbing other ideas. And eventually, at some point, they split off and got rid of symbols that weren't strictly Islamic eventually.
Yeah, it's just that when Muhammad gets his revelations for the first time, he goes home, he sits in his wife Khadijah's lap, very much like the images you've just displayed there. And it's only when Khadijah starts speaking to him that the seeds are sown of him becoming, like, in that moment, he becomes the prophet. It only later gets confirmed.
Yeah, so there's the mother, look, the symbolism is there. You can see these parallels. They're trying to allude to things, if not always explicitly, but implicitly. Any thoughts from you, JC, on this?
Yeah, the way that you actually put it now, that has actually made me think that I think you're right. So I've always been thinking about Islam as this guy is trying to bring a new religion, and then it is influenced by the things that are happening around. But it looks like it's the other way around. Like, they still have the culture that they used to have. They have the same practices. They simply just add a little bit of the Abrahamic religion, and they do that through fables and stuff, which we still find in the Quran. So it's in the end, now they say it's all Abrahamic, but when we see what they are doing, it seems to be the opposite. They just took a little bit of the Abrahamic faith and they put it on their traditions and said, there you have it. We have the true religion now.
They slapped it on top because the Christians were uppermost. They were becoming popular. It was becoming the dominant religion, right? So the Kaaba is cube-shaped with 8 corners. The 8-pointed star is a symbol for Ishtar, Venus, or the pole star. That's the central star, and all the stars go around it. I showed you the image of the stars going in a circle. John of Damascus, or John the Damascene, was writing about Muhammad and saying that they worship a black stone that was the hand of Venus. But also Muslims will say that the Kaaba is the hand of Allah in the earth. So Allah comes to earth, his hand is in the earth, his hand is on the earth. So make of that what you will. In the Kaaba, the black stone is inserted into a yoni, or female part, which is a fertility sign, which is Venus being the goddess of fertility, in the wall. And the Kaaba represents Venus, and the black stone is, as St. John said, the hand of Venus. So yeah, make of that what you will. So Lucifer is one of the various figures in folklore associated with the planet Venus. The entity's name was absorbed into Christianity as a name for the devil. Modern scholarship generally translates the term in the relevant Bible passage where the ancient Greek figure's name was historically used as morning star or shining one, rather than as a proper noun, Lucifer. As a name for the devil in Christian mythology, the more common meaning in English, Lucifer, is the Hebrew word Hillel, pronunciation Hallel. And we have spoken about Hillel is, in Islam, it is the crescent moon. It is the name of the god of the crescent moon. Any thoughts, guys?
Okay, so yet another parallel. So it looks like they, I mean, most of these parallels, they seem to then join to demons and pagan gods and all sorts of horrible stuff. It's not good.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring this up. This is just from an AI search, but the Hilal, Arabic, is the first thin crescent moon that becomes visible after the new moon. It's the beginning of each month, right? And of course, we know, we've already discussed in the past, right, that Hillel, in previous episodes, we've discussed Hillel is the god of the moon. It's one of the names of the moon god. In his full moon aspect, he's Qamar. But in his crescent aspect, he is Hillel. That is the name of the pagan god of the moon. So, and Hillel happens to be the name for Lucifer, who is, yeah, I don't know, man. To me, this just starts to, there's just too many coincidences tripping over each other here. So the prophet has named the black stone the right hand of God. Interesting. So this is the right hand of God, right hand of Allah, Yamin Allah, and for purpose. In fact, one poses there one's hand to conclude the pact, and God obtains their pact of allegiance and submission. In Quranic terminology, Allah is the king, and in his realm, there's a metropolis, the Quran, in the metropolis, a place called Beit Allah, the home of Allah. If a subject wants to testify to his loyalty, he has to go to the royal palace and conclude personally the pact of allegiance. So the right hand of the invisible Allah must be visible symbolically, and that is the Al-Hajar Al-Aswad, the black stone in the Kaaba. And this is written by Muhammad Hamidullah. So that's an Islamic scholar. So yeah, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So this is just, I think the parallels here are too close. What do you guys think? To me, it's just too many coincidences all at once.
Yeah. So, and they were worshiping stones. All of these things actually like click. Also, it looks like now Allah has three right hands, and then, sorry, two right hands, and then the third one, which is the black stone. That's very bizarre. But thinking about how all of these things could come together, I'm starting to think that maybe is after the Rashidun period, that this culture, this empire, was almost like divided in two. The southern part is developing these things. The northern part becomes quite Christian. And then once the Abbasids take over the whole thing, they just basically bring everything together into the mess that is Islam. Because all of these things happen to be very, very south. And the Umayyads, they were actually quite far. They actually decided to be in Damascus. So maybe there was one of the reasons that it's so difficult to unpack all of this is because there were things happening in multiple different places, and then someone later brings them all together, and there are so many influences from different regions. Could be.
Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting thing that JC has just said there, because it kind of reminds me of the discussions that you've had, Lloyd, previously when we were talking about Yemen and the influence of Yemen on Islam.
Yeah, so, I mean, but you've got this from John of Damascus. So it looks like they've retained these, so these pagan ideas would have been probably too entrenched. Okay, these pagan ideas were already part and parcel of the culture. They couldn't get rid of them. They were too deeply entrenched. But what they seem to have done is they reinterpreted them. They placed a new meaning over the story. So they took the idea of Lucifer and the crescent moon and Allah's hand in the earth and Venus, and they said, no, it's actually here. Let's give it a fresh new coat of paint. This is the Islamic meaning now. So they transformed, they reinterpreted the old story. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting here. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just thinking as well that I see more and more videos popping up of people who will say, well, Christianity is pagan, and then they will use references. They copied these from the Romans, and then those things were the other way around. The Romans copied from the Christians and so on. But when we look at Islam, it seems to be all of these attacks that people are trying on Christianity and they are not landing. They seem to be at home with Islam. Like it looks like this is what they did. They didn't create something new, and then other people like pagans started copying from Islam. It looks like the opposite. Like Islam just took those things that had been there for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and like you said, they put a new story on top and said, no, this is new. Muhammad just told us to do this, but it was there for hundreds of years.
Here's the meaning of it.
Yeah.
No, so Lucifer is one of the various figures in folklore associated with the planet Venus. So this is about Hillel, and the Arabian moon god, and Lucifer. Originally, he stemmed from a son of the personified dawn, the goddess Aurora in Roman mythology. and the entity's name was subsequently absorbed into Christianity as a name for the devil. Modern scholarship generally translates the term where the ancient Greek figure's name was historically used, see Isaiah 14:12, as morning star or shining one, rather than as the proper noun, Lucifer. So as a name for the devil in Christian theology, the more common meaning in English, Lucifer, is the rendering of the Hebrew word Hellel, right, in Isaiah. And the translators of the book took the word from the Latin Vulgate, which translated that word by the Latin word Lucifer, uncapitalized, not a proper noun, meaning the morning star, the planet Venus, or as an adjective, the light-bringing or light-bringer. As a name for the planet, in its morning aspect, Lucifer, the light-bringer, is a proper noun and is capitalized in English. In the Greco-Roman civilization, it was often personified and considered a god, and in some versions considered the son of Aurora, the dawn. A similar name used by the Roman poet Catullus for the planet in its evening aspect is Noctifer, or the night bringer. So yeah, just a little bit of interest about the origin of the name Lucifer, but we do see some parallels. And then you mentioned megaliths, Thunderous. Let's have a look at this. This is from a magazine called The Sciences.
Can I just bring one point upon the previous one? You brought up Isaiah 14, verse 12, I think it was. I will challenge the findings of the so-called experts, because if you go to Isaiah verse 15, it talks about, I don't think it's referring to Satan or the demons, because verse 15 talks about being brought down to the grave. There is no other scripture in the Bible that ever refers to fallen angels ever going to the grave. The only mention of the outcome for fallen angels is in the book of Revelation and the lake of fire. Okay, so I would not necessarily agree with their understanding there.
Yeah, but the whole idea of fallen angels, that comes out of Enoch, if I recall, and it's never quite implied. It's just something that's assumed or asserted.
But yeah, I think any angel that had a standing with God and then decided to rebel, for instance, the angels that started materializing bodies and having intercourse with the pre-flood women, those would be fallen angels, or what we call demons, or what Jesus referred to as demons.
But I don't know if that's necessarily, look, I mean, it's kind of off the topic.
True.
It's not necessarily connected to what we're doing here, but also that whole term, the whole idea of giants and fallen angels is actually not explicit in the text, because it can also be translated to mean the governors, the people in charge. So it can also mean like the politicians in charge. So, for instance, I just came across some, for instance, take the idea of the Egyptian eunuch. Sorry, no, the Ethiopian eunuch. Philip meets an Ethiopian eunuch, and he says, "Please teach me how to interpret and understand the scriptures, because you know and I don't." Philip then teaches him, and then Philip is taken in rapture or whatever up to heaven. Now, everyone assumes that the Ethiopian eunuch, that word means he had his cojones cut off.
No, right? It's just a position. Yeah, I get that. It was just a position.
So, but it doesn't mean that. It means, what it means is he is a government representative. So the word eunuch also means a government employee, which has got nothing to do with someone chopping off your winky. So the problem is that certain interpretations of words have become very popular, but they're wrong. They simply, someone ran with an idea and it became embedded in the culture, but it just means government employee. He worked for the king or he worked for the queen, So he had business in the country, which is why he was there. So yeah, but let's not get too distracted. I like to have my notes in front of me before I get into these topics, because I hate to talk off the top of my head. So anyway, but we spoke of megaliths earlier, Thunderous. You mentioned megaliths, right? And something interesting. So this is Jean-Léon Gérôme praying on the rooftops. That's this picture here, or this painting, right? Photograph or painting that was taken. So this is from the 1800s, I believe. And this is the May-June, sorry, oh, bugger. Let me just find myself again. Here we go. This is the May-June 1982 magazine, The Sciences, page 17. And it speaks here, in its origins, it now appears the Kaaba might even have had features in common with the stone circle on Salisbury Plain. In other words, it's a megalith, like Stonehenge. Islam had its genesis in the urban trading center of Mecca in the early 7th century. At that time, a proliferation of gods was worshipped there. The gods associated with sacred stones and trees. Others were astral and linked with the sun, the moon, and Venus, or such prominent stars as Canopus. And that's going to be important, star Canopus. A carefully regulated cult with annual pilgrimage rites had been practiced at the Kaaba. And through the midst of Muslim legends and traditions, Western scholars have sought without success to piece together the story of the Kaaba's origins. The sanctuary was first called Al-Bayt, the house, and it was a roofless enclosure with walls somewhat above the height of a man. So it didn't even have a roof. In the early part of the 7th century, walls were built up probably in alternate layers of stone and wood, like the churches of Ethiopia. So that layering effect was how churches in Ethiopia were built. And the sanctuary came to be called the Kaaba, literally the cubic building, on account of its roughly cubic shape. Now, this is written by David A. King. Yeah, so take that with a pinch of salt, fine and well, but it's still very, very interesting. The world about the Kaaba, study the sacred directions in medieval Islam. Okay, let's have a look at this one here. It's possible that all of these associations might have arisen after the Kaaba's original construction. The orientation of the sanctuary, conceivably, was arbitrary or was influenced by the local topography. But there is more evidence. A modern plan of the Kaaba taken from a map of Mecca prepared from aerial photography reveals another alignment. The major axis of the Kaaba is aligned to the rising of the star Canopus. Okay, so hold on, let me just see. Let me see what we're told. So Canopus, or Alpha Carinae, is the second brightest star in the night sky. It is outshone only by Sirius. Okay, so it's a tool of navigation, and yeah, but it is the second brightest star in the sky, right? And the minor axis is actually several degrees off the direction of the summer sunrise. Rather, it is precisely aligned towards the southernmost setting position of the moon at the winter solstice. So the Kaaba is aligned with Canopus and the setting of the moon at the winter solstice. Fascinating. This discovery was made a few years ago by Gerald Hawkins, best known for his work on Stonehenge. Roughly every 19 years, that number 19 is very important to Muslims regarding the Quran, which is a magical number in the Quran. The crescent moon sets at the spot on the horizon visible along the southeast side of the Kaaba. And this lunar alignment is found in many megalithic sites in Europe. So this looks like it used to be an astronomical observatory. And yeah, so it was a megalith in the past. So you guys, what do you think?
Okay, well, it's very interesting. I'm just thinking if the Kaaba was completely redone, including the foundations in the 17th century, whether they just kept exactly the same direction. So basically, this alignment happens to go back all the way to the beginning, or if it is the guys in the 17th century that decided to have this alignment. You know what I mean?
So just say again, explain again.
Whether the whole Kaaba was redone in the 17th century. You showed that in a few slides ago, and they did everything, including the foundations. So I wonder if they kept the alignment from the previous foundations.
The foundation is still the same. So I think the foundational alignment remains, because this was done, this is in the 80s, I think. So the alignment, I mean, look, if they changed it, right, way back, then why would they then change it from whatever it was to be lunar aligned and astronomically aligned? That would be very strange. I think it was the same, but either way, somehow it's astronomically aligned like a megalith.
Yeah, I think it probably would have been astronomically aligned when it was first built or constructed, because that seems to be fitting in time with the thinking pattern of human beings on the world at that period of time as well, when you look at the megalithic structures. Just one question on a previous comment that you made, no roof. Now, do you think the lack of timbers within that area of Arabia played a role in its construction, or many of the constructions at that period of time? Because to have a roof, you would require timbers. Do you think that is wrong?
That's possibly true, but then lots of these other temples had no roofs either. You know, lots of these temples I showed before, like these guys didn't have any roofs. Let me just bring this one up. These guys also didn't have, if you look at these temples, they had no roofs either. Like, these had no roofs, they were open air. So I think this was the common theme. That maybe they were too primitive to build blinking roofs and they didn't know how. But if you look at these old temples as well, they had no roofs. If you look at these old things,
yeah,
no roofs. So this seems to be in line with the way things were back then. They were too primitive maybe to make roofs. And as you said, no timber. I think that's a valid point. Anything else that you think in regards to that?
No, that's the only thing coming to my mind at the moment, just as you brought up the paragraph.
Yeah. JC, anything before we go?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, so this is now the Sciences 22, 5th of May and June 1982. Faces of the Kaaba, the article is called. It is a primitive observatory, a weather vane, and a pointer to God. It's like Stonehenge, exactly, Janice. It's supposed to be something like Stonehenge. So clearly it has an earlier pagan meaning. So they're claiming, remember, that Abraham built it to Allah, then why would he have it? Why would Abraham and Ishmael build something that is clearly pagan in structure and alignment? And if Adam built it, why would Adam build something that was clearly pagan in structure and alignment? If Adam built it according to Muslims' assertions, or if Adam rebuilt it and Ishmael helped him rebuild it, then why would they build it in alignment with astrological pagan religions? It doesn't make sense. Clearly it was originally pagan to start with. Does that make sense to you guys?
Well, of course it does. First of all, I want us to think about, like, if Adam had built it, then we'd have to question two things as far as Islam is concerned. One, the size of Adam, who was 90 foot tall, that it doesn't make sense for even when he was bowing down, the objects would still be smaller than what he is in that sujood position or whatever position. Second thing as well I want us to bear in mind is the great global flood. Now, I would say that the topography of Earth would have changed then, and the destructive powers of the waters would surely have damaged anything that Adam had made previously.
So then if it was rebuilt, let's assume that Abraham comes along with Ishmael and they rebuild it. Why would they align it along pagan lines? You know, that makes no sense. So clearly it was originally pagan from the start. And Ower says it was more about not obstructing the sky for their celestial things. And that's a good point. So it says here, it seems likely that the Kaaba was a microcosm of the celestial and terrestrial universe of the pagan Arabs. Each of the most important aspects of their physical world is represented. Of the celestial, you have the sun, the moon, and Canopus, the brightest star in the southern sky. So it is the brightest star in the southern hemisphere. And of the terrestrial, you have the winds, the rains, and the geographic directions. Unifying the cosmos of celestial bodies, winds, rains, and directions in this way would not have been strange to pre-Islamic Arabs. Astronomical and meteorological phenomena were intimately connected in their folklore. And here, the explanation of the Riyad al-Salihin, right, from Sheikh Muhammad bin Salih al-Uthaymeen, he's the eminent Sheikh. So, however, these two forms of company do not indicate that Allah is with the people in their dwellings, right? He, the mighty and sublime, is with them while still above the heavens on his throne. And there is no difficulty in that, because a thing can be above while still with you. The Arabs would say we continued to travel as long as the moon was with us. Very interesting. So the moon was with them and they were okay because they were looked after by the moon. Yeah, no relation to moon worship at all. If everyone knows that the moon is in the sky, they would also say we continued traveling as long as Canopus was with us. So it looks like the ancient Arabs, even according to this guy, is telling us that yes, these things, the moon and Canopus is important to the Arabs. It's of significance to them for directions, for navigation, but also, yeah, it's just the moon's in the sky, so we're okay. Yeah. So yeah, Adam invented cinder block. Well, there you go. It was invented by a Muslim. There you go. Muslims invented cinder block as well. So let me see. Kaaba has no water source. Yeah, there's also that. All right. So the Kaaba, right? The door is on the northeast side of the edifice, facing the summer sunrise. The most sacred corner of the Kaaba is the southeastern corner, which is embedded in the black stone, right, which is the black stone, facing both the south wind and the east wind, directions defined by the rising of Canopus and the summer sunrise. Canopus is the brightest star in the southern sky and significant in the alignment of the Kaaba. Right, the major axis of the Kaaba is aligned to within 2 degrees of the rising at Canopus at about the 1st century AD. The minor axis is aligned with the southernmost setting position of the moon at the winter solstice, and this alignment is like the megalithic sites in Europe. So it was in alignment with their whole astrological ideas, right, or culture. It says here, I suspect the original Qibla, direction of prayer of the pagan Arabs, was towards the rising sun. Muhammad prohibited his followers from praying at sunrise, in language that suggests his intent was to set his sect apart from others. And if pagan Arabs had previously prayed at sunrise, it is reasonable to suppose they would have faced the rising sun. So, yeah. So, on one's right, you have Yamin, the hand. The south wind blows from Yemen, the root of which relates to good fortune. So again, you've got this alignment with Yemen. So Yemen's also very, very important to them. And on the right hand, not the left hand, because the left hand is the hand you wipe your backside with. Yeah. The lunar alignment of the Kaaba may well have been intentional. The Quran states that God made the Kaaba a structure for men and for the sacred month, which could be a reference to the regulation of the lunar calendar. Since intercalation was banned by the Prophet in favor of a strictly lunar calendar, intercalation is that over time the calendar loses times because the length of each lunar cycle is not identical, so you don't have exactly 365 days a year. So within our calendar, we add a leap year. We add an extra day every 4 years. So by the same token, they would have to add a certain number of days every few years, but he banned that. So it's not difficult to see how this feature of the Kaaba might have been forgotten in later Arabic writings. So yeah, any thoughts on that before I go on?
Yeah, and actually they keep the lunar calendar to this day, which is something I never really thought about it. It's like, well, Muslims have this calendar, fine, why not? But now that you're putting all of this on a screen, it looks like is not just because reasons, it's because this is how they were doing things, and they were really, really much in love with the moon.
Yeah, I mean, the moon is referenced to everything, so somehow they're really close to the moon. Right, Atar. So we've spoken about different gods like Ishtar, Atar. We've mentioned this in previous episodes. Atar or Ishtar, Semitic deity whose role, name, and gender varied by culture. Could be male, could be female. Always identified with the planet Venus, and in pre-Islamic South Arabia was worshipped as a god of war. Alat, according to a recent study, is believed to have been introduced into Arabia from Syria and was moon goddess of North Arabia. If correct, she corresponds to the moon deity of South Arabia, Al-Makka, also known as Wad, or Shin, as he was called, the difference being the gender. So, interesting, the moon goddess, which becomes masculine then in Arabia. And that's the Archaeology of World Religions by Jack Finnegan, 1952. And Arabia shared the gods of Mesopotamia, being so close to Babylon, except the genders and symbols of these deities were later swapped around. For instance, the sun god Shamash became the sun goddess Shams, and the southern Arabian Ishtar became the male storm god Athtar. It's all the same deity, just renamed and gender swapped. So the temple was built by a Muqarrib, or priest king, named Yara al-Darih, and he was dedicated to Al-Makka. Al-Makka, or El-Mukka, was the moon god corresponding to Shin in Mesopotamia, the chief deity of the Sabaeans. The deity was conceived of as masculine in South Arabia and was known to the Manaeans by the name of Wad. Now, we've spoken previously of Wad. Wad is actually mentioned in the Quran. Wad happens to be a father god. Wad is father. Wad is also the god of love. God is love. Wad is love. And they speak of the Qatbanians as and to the Hadramautians as Sin. So you'd think these would be different gods, but actually these different names are not separate gods. They're just different aspects of the same deity. His consort, his wife, was the sun Shams, the same as Shamash in Mesopotamia. Their son was Atar. He was the planet Venus and corresponded to the Babylonian Ishtar. Many other heavenly bodies were considered divine and were believed to spring from the moon god and the sun god. So that's the Archaeology of World Religions by Jack Finnegan. So again, you've got this constant overlap and this intertwining of all of the Mesopotamian, Canaanite, and other deities, and they were all very much integral because Shin was also Allah. Shin was the moon god of Muhammad's family. So again, you've got all of this tightly bound up with Muhammad's family, with the religion, and yeah, so we're back to Allah being Shin, being Al-Makkah, being a moon god, being the Syrian, whatever. Guys, any thoughts?
That's very good. It looks like they keep recycling names. That's very interesting.
It's interesting the role that Babylon plays in world religions, as it was. And Babylon would have then had to have been the centralization of theologies or various forms of religion at the time. And all it's done is spread out its influences. And when the influences spread out, they've changed the names and they've changed the masculinity to suit the tribe or the nation of that time. But it's still, in fact, something that originates with Babylon hundreds, if not thousands of years previous.
Yeah, no. So this is a paper, a stylistic and comparative study of unpublished pre-Islamic stone sculptures from Arabia by Hamid Ibrahim al-Mazrou. And that's his thesis from the Institute of Archaeology, University College London, 1990. Let's see what he says. The religion of ancient South Arabia was an astronomical religion. Fascinating. Based on the worship of gods personified by heavenly bodies. Similar to that of the northern Semitic Arab people, these gods can be incorporated into one triad. A triad is a collection of three gods, father, mother, son, right? So you have Venus, the moon god, and the sun goddess. At the head of the pantheon was Atar, the god identified with the planet Venus, who was accorded particular veneration and to whom most of the shrines of South Arabia were dedicated. His name appears in hundreds of inscriptions and also compounded into the names of many individuals, such as Kirbit, wherever. The moon god was known in South Arabia by different names, and Anbay to the Katabanians, El-Makkah and Haubas to the Sabaeans, Wad to the Manaeans, and Shin to the Hadramautis and to the Babylonians. The third of the triad is the sun goddess, who was believed to be consort of the moon god. The sun goddess was also known by different local names, Dat and Diat Himyan to the Sabaeans, and so on and so on and so on. So we're constantly getting reinforcement that, yes, these gods were well-known, well-established. And what's interesting is that Muhammad's had two sons, supposedly, Abd Alat and Abd Manaf. Both of these, as we know, are pagan deities. Abd Alat is the female version of Allah. This is Allah's consort. You had Alat and Allah, because according to the Babylonian, Canaanite, and other religious traditions, would have a triad. You'd have a male god, his wife, his consort, his girlfriend, his mistress, and their sons and kids. So you had Abd Alat, the female Allah, and Abd Manaf. Nearly all sources assert that his eldest son by Khadija was Al-Qasim. His youngest son by Maria was Ibrahim. Many sources state that Khadija had a second son, Abdullah, and this is where the controversy starts. Don't forget, Muhammad wasn't a Muslim at that point. Some sources say Khadija had three sons, Al-Tayyib, the good, Al-Tahir, the pure. Ibn Sa'd says these were by names or nicknames given to one person, and his real name was Abdullah. This is contradicted by an old tradition from Al-Nawawi, who says that Muhammad's two sons by Khadija were named Abdul Uzza and Abd Manaf. Fascinating. Al-Uzza, yeah, isn't that something to do with the three daughters the three pagan goddesses, the three cranes? Ibn al-Mutanna says that the second son was named Abd Manaf. Abu Ubaidah says it was the first son who was named Abd Manaf. A later historian, Ibn Nasir al-Din, says that Al-Qasim was the third son born after Islam. Ibn Kathir reports tradition that Ibn Haytham spoke to Hisham ibn Urwa, Aisha's nephew, about Muhammad and Khadija's sons. Ibn Haytham asked if it was true that they were named Al-Tayyib and Al-Tahir, and Hisham replied that is a lie. The names are Abdul Uzza and Al-Manaf and Al-Qasim. I'll pause there for a moment, guys. Any thoughts on this? Because Muslims have no idea what they're talking about, but they seem to be asserting that you had Alat, Manat, and Al-Uzza. These are the three pagan goddesses. We've already got their names around here.
Well, one thing that probably I think Thandros would like is I've just noticed now even the great importance of God actually saying, well, I am who I am, and this will be my name forever. When we see these sort of demons, they just travel around, they all have different names, and it creates a lot of confusion. But God has one name, and it will be that name forever. It's kind of curious when you see this mess that happens everywhere else.
Right. Yeah, and these traditions are contradictory. It is not possible to harmonize the information. One possibility is that Abd al-Uzza was the real name of Khadija's son by her first husband. He also died in infancy, and he's called Abdullah in the surviving records. Great. That would leave Al-Qasim and Abd al-Manaf as the names of Muhammad's sons. Al-Qasim, the distributor, was an acceptable name for a Muslim, but if Muhammad did have a son called Abd Manaf, later Muslims would have been embarrassed over this blasphemous name because it's the name of a pagan deity that he and she worshipped. They might have given the child the names Al-Tayyib and Al-Tahir as bynames or nicknames to cover up his real name before renaming him with the pious Abdullah.
Well, that they're already renaming gods and assigning new sexes to gods. So what difference does it make if they're naming two sons of Muhammad names that are fitting for the cultural practice or religious practice at the time? Renaming is nothing new to these people.
I mean, this is so haphazard. I mean, this is really haphazard. You cannot escape these pagan gods and Muhammad. It's just impossible.
Your fourth bullet point.
Sorry, go on, Thandros.
Thank you, JC. The fourth bullet point down, Ibn Kathir reports of tradition. Hisham replied, that is a lie. The fact that you've got Islamic infighting at that point as well is a good reference that there was already an internal issue with names given to Muhammad's sons.
Yep. I mean, this is all, but why do these Islamic sources constantly keep coming back to pagan references? You know, he named his son after pagan goddesses, which is crazy. Yeah.
And it's not just the sons, it's that his father, and you've mentioned this before, the name of Muhammad is supposed to be Abdullah, and he's a pagan, and his name is Abdullah. Later is when they say, no, the name of God is Allah. And it's like, but the pagan father of Muhammad was called Abdullah. It's like, for goodness sake, that name was there for pagan gods. Yes, it was just a generic term. It is not the name of God. So we see it in whichever direction we go from Muhammad, up or down.
I think as well with what JC said a while ago about there seems to be two narratives that they're trying to put together, the North and the South. And this is possibly where these contradictions and arguments are coming from, because you've got the Northern narrative and you've got the Southern narrative. They're trying to homogenize the two, and it's just not. This is where you get the infighting as to what the names are, what would be the correct names. You've got the ones that are probably going with, say, the real names as they were given at the time, and then you've got the other side that's saying, no, hang on a minute, we can't do that because it's a little bit embarrassing to the narrative that we have. We can't have Muhammad displayed as a pagan or given his sons pagan god names. That just won't be fit. So that's where the infighting possibly comes from.
That makes perfect sense to me, though. That makes good sense to me. There was this infighting between these two groups, and they had to somehow harmonize these two separate stories, and they couldn't. Yeah. They couldn't perfectly do it. That makes perfect sense. JC, what do you think of that?
It's JC's idea. I've just put it together like that. It originates with JC, so I'm hoping he agrees with it.
Sorry, I was muted. I didn't realize. Yeah, this is certainly, I think you're showing more and more like they are bringing things together. Now, how exactly? Like, no idea. But when you're actually showing these influences, some of them, they come from Persia. Then we have all of these things from Yemen. Is at one point, the pieces must come together and say, okay, this is what they have done. At least that's the hope, because at the moment, it's really a soup.
It is a soup, yeah, but it's just that I'm trying to show, look, we don't have the answers always, right? But I just have a lot of questions based on all this evidence, because all of these things somehow touch on the region, the time, the influences, the people that are all linked to Muhammad in concrete ways, right? So there's so many direct and so many indirect influences that are all literally pagan, cultural, and some cases go back thousands of years before Muhammad. And all of these ideas are present in the Sirah, it's in the Hadith, it's in his life, it's in his family, it's in his kids. It's like this, you just can't have this many coincidences stacking up like this. So Muhammad's pagan family. You have Hashim ibn Abd Manaf. This was the great-grandfather of Muhammad and the progenitor of the ruling Banu Hashim clan of the Quraysh tribe in Mecca. Abd Manaf, fascinating. Hashim was the son of Abd Manaf, fascinating. Abdul Muttalib was the first Meccan to introduce the practice of dyeing his hair with henna. Now, look, guys, of course we do realize that every single one of these stories could be complete garbage, right? It could be 100% garbage. We don't know, because the histories, who knows? They could have made up every single story. But that said, all of these stories, even if they are completely false and fake, they all point in a certain direction. They all have the same contents that are all very distinctly pagan, Babylonian, Canaanite, and all sorts of other things. But it's just all so consistent. Whether it's, so if they fabricated it, why did they use this as its basis? And if it's true, then this thing is entirely pagan from top to bottom. Does that make sense to you guys?
Well, the practice of dyeing, the practice of dyeing hair with henna is a practice that is still continuing today in Islamic cultures.
Yes.
Yeah, and if we look through these traditions and we saw that they were talking about dragons, we would probably be looking at China to see if they had borrowed something from China, because they had those traditions. So we're looking at what they do now, and there were people doing those things. So they didn't just invent them; they copied from regions. So it's making sense.
Yeah, so just so you know, this is a very common practice of Muslim men dyeing their hair red with henna. If you've ever wondered, this comes from Muhammad's grandfather. You see, this whole idea of being, aren't these woke hair colors? Isn't this what the woke do?
It's interesting to note that his grandfather wasn't a Muslim and died before Islam came about, and yet these men are following a tradition set by Muhammad's grandfather and not Muhammad himself. That's interesting.
Yeah, isn't that really fascinating? So Abdul Muttalib was the first Meccan to introduce this practice of dyeing hair with henna to his fellow tribespeople during a visit to, of all places, Yemen, where its use was widespread. That's in the Encyclopedia of Islam, volume 9, page 383. So yeah, Yemen has nothing to do with Islam, obviously. So yeah, they get this from Yemen. So we see another concrete impact of Yemeni culture on Islam. So we'll take a break in a few minutes. I think I've got about 20 slides left, but yeah. So Manaf, this is from the Encyclopedia of Islam, volume 6, page 349. Manaf, it says, was one of the greatest deities of Mecca by Al-Tabari. Manaf is the name of a deity of ancient Arabia. This fourth form, Masdar, from the root Nawaf, is connected with the Katabanite Nawafin, meaning the exalted, and an epithet or name describing Athar, Venus, at its peak. Interesting. Now we're back to Athar, the moon god, the war god, which is Venus at its peak. So yeah, we're back to this. And they speak of, from the same root is derived Tanuf, which climbs high in the firmament, an epithet of the sun. So now we're back to the sun and Venus and the stars, and the whole, the march just goes on and goes in circles and comes right back. So once more, the same thing. Yeah, there's nothing in Yemen, they said. Exactly. Yeah. So, okay. So, yeah. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I think you and I had a discussion a couple of years ago, Lloyd, where we were discussing Yemen, and I asked the question, do you think that's one of the things that's happening over there? They're bombing out all the pagan evidence with the Saudi Arabian bombing. And you said, I remember you were responding by saying that some of the main targets of the Saudi Arabian military were the museums and locations of artifacts that tied some of the practices of Islam to pre-Islamic paganism.
Yeah, this is here. I'll just show you guys this. I'll bring this up. So Damat Regional Museum. So this is the museum that had 12,000 artifacts. This was in that part of Ethiopia, apparently, where they had all of the evidence, all of these all of these archaeological pieces that discuss this history that we're talking about now. In 2015, a Saudi airstrike destroyed this museum, causing the loss of over 12,000 artifacts. So US archaeologist Lamia Khalidi reported that Saudi airstrikes have impacted numerous heritage sites in Yemen, despite the UNESCO no-strike list. Al-Mahabisha is in the Hajjah Governorate, which has been a frequent target of airstrikes during the Yemeni civil war. Mahabisha, so the place of the Ethiopians. So this is where the Ethiopians were dominant in Yemen, Al-Mahabisha. And you might remember when we started in the first episode, we focused on the Ethiopians and Al-Mahabisha. This is the famous Makoraba. Mahabisha is the Makoraba that Muslims try to claim was Mecca, that Ptolemy spoke of. So Ptolemy speaks in the 2nd century of Makoraba. Muslims say it is Mecca, but we know now that it is Al-Mahabisha, and the Saudis bombed the living crap out of it. So ask yourself why. So they speak here of Abd Manaf, one of the 4 sons of Qusay, reformer of the cult in Mecca. His mother had promised him to the god, so to protect him from the evil eye, for he was so handsome, he was named Al-Qamar, the moon. It's interesting, Abd Manaf. So yeah, this is like one of, Manaf. So this is Al-Tabri speaking of someone within the Islamic community in Mecca, and they speak of his name was Abd Manaf, and they also called him Abd Manaf Al-Qamar. So Manaf is Venus and Qamar is the moon, the full moon. So he was named after 2 solar deities as a way to keep him lucky and safe. Crazy stuff. But I guess it had nothing to do with the moon. So let's finish off on this slide. I think we'll end here today. This is Sheikh Ibrahim Al-Qattan, head of the Islamic Sharia courts in Jordan, right? This guy here, with Professor Ismail Balogun, Department of Religion, University of Ilorin, Nigeria, International Symposium on the Concept of Monotheism in Islam and Christianity. This is in 1981 in Rome. Let's have a look at the gods Oratal and Allah. We'll end here. Anything you want to say before I go on, guys? Anything?
No, I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay, so Herodotus, the Greek historian from about 450 BC, tells us that the North Arabians had a god and goddess. So again, you have this pairing, this is the pre-Islamic, this is the very Canaanite and Babylonian, and there's another culture that instituted this whole idea that they borrowed from, the idea of the god and the god having, a wife and so on, named Oratal and Alilat. Does the name Ilat or Ilat? So think about it. Allah, Al-Ilah, right? Muslims love to tell us, or people love to say that the name Allah comes from Al-Ilah, the God, right? Well, you also had Al-Ilat, not just Al-Ilah, right? Oratal, it says here, is simply a corruption of Allah, or Allah Ta'ala, Allah the Most High. So Oratal is just the corruption of the word Allah, and Alilat is his wife. So Allah and Alat. Back to that again. Allah has been around in pagan Arabia long before Muhammad was moved to zeal on his behalf. Any thoughts on that, guys? I think we're back to Allah and Alat and the little star kids.
And the thing is, it features even in the Quran. So that's not something that we can even deny and say it's in the traditions. No, it's in the Quran when it says the 3 daughters of Allah. But one of them, the name is Allat, which is the feminine of Allah. So it's really right there. It must have been there pretty much from day one.
Yeah. So Islamic Sheikh Ibrahim Al-Qattan, in a lecture given at the International Progress Association in Vienna, said that the religion of Arabia can be traced by epigraphic and inscription evidence back to 500 BC, or 1,000 years before Muhammad. He said that they had gods named Baal Shamun, Dusamawi, Rahman, which they got from Syria, Persia, and the pagan Kabbalist Jews, and Allah. According to Sheikh Ibrahim, Allah was the highest deity, and his name was inscribed in stone by Jewish traders along the Arabian trade routes. Allah was the highest deity, and his name was inscribed in stone by Jewish traders. These paganized Jews also called him Rahman, while the Arabs called him Allah. And Rahman is we've discussed Rahman, the whole naming of Rahman previously, and this is a monotheistic God. It is very clear, but he's not exactly like Yahweh. It is very clear that these sacred concepts, such as Allah, the Kaaba with its black stone, running around the Kaaba 7 times, climbing Mount Arafat, as well as the God named Rahman and stoning of Satan, which Muhammad got by revelation, was salvaged from the dung heaps of ancient paganism in Arabia. So we have learned that Allah is not the Elohim of the Bible, and we now see that he did come from the era before Islam. Well, what is this primal origin of Allah's name, and how far back can we trace Allah's steps? So I got that from an article which discusses this symposium on Islam. So yeah, guys, I'll drop this here. I'll leave it here for now. But yeah, what do you think so far? I'll pause here. So for the audience, what are your thoughts? And yeah, hopefully you've learned something. Did this open your eyes? Did this give you questions? So guys, what do you think so far?
For me, it looks more and more clear that the traditions were there, cultures were there, religions were there, pagans were there, and then they took a little bit of the Judeo-Christian tradition. They put it there, and then they said, "Oh no, we are, the true followers of Jesus and all of that." About the name of Rahman, yeah, we've discussed it before. The Jews use the name as for God. Interestingly, and then of course it makes it into the Quran and so on. Interestingly enough, the traditions, they say that it is just a guy whose name is Ar-Rahman, and Muhammad hears his name and says, "Oh, that name is very good. From now on, we are going to use this name for God." And there is hadith about this, the Christian priest was talking about it. So we know where the name was actually used, which it was the Jews in Yemen. But when we go to the traditions, we can see the completely fabricated story of he just saw a guy, he liked the name, and he said, "Well, it's such a wonderful name, it must belong to Allah."
Fair enough. I mean, yeah, they were just making stuff up left and right anyway.
Yeah,
so
I think it's of interest to know that you mentioned something about 500 years and 1,000 before Muhammad. And I know on the previous shows that we've done that, so we've often discussed the Arabs were very antagonistic to the Jews at the time, and they came into, I think it was at the time of Nehemiah when they wanted to rebuild the temple wall. They came with camels, and the camels had crescent-shaped moon ornaments hanging off the camel necks.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
we spoke about that. It's Zaymun and Zamuna, and yeah, it's in Gideon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really mentioned that's in the Bible as well. And these are the enemies of the Jews and the enemies of God. Yeah, and they had the crescent moons and their camels. Yeah, so but yeah, I think there's just so much pagan stuff linked to Islam. You just can't escape it. There's just no way to get away from it. And I think over time, hopefully people will start to connect the dots, start to investigate this more, and start to make sense of how they must have been trying to fuse all of this pagan stuff with the Abrahamic, with the Abrahamic ideas, and they were trying to make a religion, and they couldn't quite get it right, because you got all this detritus that's left in the Sirah, the Hadiths, and others that are unexplained, and that shouldn't be there, quite honestly.
So I guess that people in academia, they must know a lot of this stuff, but probably they don't want to pick the fight. Just like everybody knows that Abraham was never in Mecca, that's way too far, and all of those things. But they let Muslims say, okay, so Abraham was there, yeah, whatever. And they move on to do their actual real studies. They must know that a lot of this stuff came from pagan tribes and all of that, but they cannot say it publicly because it's a fight that they will lose. And, a lot of nasty things happen because of that. So good thing to have you picking that fight for everybody else.
You're right. Actually, hold on. You know what? The Sources of Islam by Tisdall. Actually, I just found something here. It's very unexpectedly. Oh, wow. I'm just going to share this quickly. So this is the book. Let me see. It's page 24. This is the book that I've been using. This is not the original. The Sources of Islam. Right, I'm actually using the Sources of the Quran. This is part 2 of his book. I've been doing this on Tuesdays with Usama. We've been discussing all of the myths that make up Islam, right? And they speak here. He writes about it. Herodotus, more than 4 centuries before Christ, tells us that the Arabs of his day had only 2 gods, Oratal and Alilat, evidently meaning Allah Ta'ala and Alat. And the term Allah itself is repeatedly found in the 7 Mu'allaqat, whose authors lived before Muhammad in the Diwan of Laudate. So Allah had a companion, Allah had a partner, and he was known as Oratal, which is a corruption of Allah, but he had a wife. So you had Allah and Allat. So there you go. There's even more evidence for this. And we know the Kaaba of the Holy Masjid. So yeah, so this existed before the Christian era. So we learned from Diodorus Siculus, 60 years before the Christian era, that it existed. So the Kaaba was around long before Muhammad. From the use of Allah in its manifest unity of Allah was never forgotten by the Arabs. Fascinating, but there we go. So there's even more evidence. Allah had a partner, Allah had a wife.
Okay, maybe that explains the verse that says, how can Allah have a son if he didn't have a companion? Maybe he had a split up at that point.
Yeah, he had a breakup. He became a single guy. Yep. Yeah, so obviously they had to separate him from this idea of Allah having a wife. So I think that would make sense. So guys, I think I'll call it a night here. So for the audience, tomorrow I've got an extremely busy day. I'm going to try and do a stream tomorrow, but I have an extremely busy day, and then I'm away for a week on business, so I will have no opportunity to do any streams until at least the 14th. But I'm going to have Steve Mashni on, and the usual crew, of course. So we're going to have Steve on. We're going to have a topic. Let me just see what the topic was that Steve was talking about. Hopefully I can get it on before, but he's got a couple of interesting topics in mind. I'm just waiting for the messenger to load. And he wants to talk about Aisha's semen stain dilemma and Muhammad's fixation with devils. So we can do one or both. Whatever. I just thought we'd do both. So I'm going to plan that for a couple of weeks from now once I'm back from my trip. But yeah, I will not be able to stream for a week, so tomorrow should be my last. So guys, any last comment from you guys before we close for the night?
No, thank you, Lloyd. This has been great. And it's an eye-opener to see all of these parallels with things that they were there from before. So yeah, very well done.
Cool, man. Thanks. Yep. So Thunderous, if nothing, then I'll call it a night here.
No, just thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, JC, and thank you for the listening audience.
Yep. So thanks, guys. God bless. Good night. We shall see you all soon.